video on some of the changes to the offshore services industry and some of the recent changes implemented by the European Union and the OECD, the Organization for Economic Control and Development. In March 2020, the Economic and Financial Affairs Council of the EU adopted a revised EU blacklist of non-cooperative jurisdictions for tax purposes. What that means is these jurisdictions don't like tax competition or unfair, as they call it, advantages that some of these offshore services countries offer, and they don't like the tax competition, apparently. So that's understandable. They have to pay for their radar and satellites and roads and things like that. So naturally, they need to collect taxes in their countries, and so they want to make sure that other countries aren't unfairly, as they see it, enacting laws that reduce their tax revenue. So basically, that's kind of the idea. So going on, the EU finance ministers agreed to add 4 new jurisdictions to the list: Cayman Islands, Palau, Panama, and Seychelles. And following the latest revision, as of February 18, 2020, the EU blacklist comprised the following 12 jurisdictions: American Samoa, the Cayman Islands, Fiji, Guam, Oman, Palau, Panama, Samoa, Seychelles, Trinidad and Tobago, the U.S. Virgin Islands, yes, the U.S., part of the U.S., and Vanuatu. So here's a background. The EU blacklist was first adopted in December, on December 5th, 2017. It was part of the EU's effort to clamp down on tax avoidance and harmful tax practices, as we mentioned before. Out of the 92 jurisdictions initially chosen for the screening, 17 jurisdictions were placed on the blacklist on December 7, 2017. And over the course of 2018, most of these countries and territories on the blacklist engaged in constructive dialogue with the EU. So typically they send people to these jurisdictions, have talks with the leaders, and they made commitments to comply with the EU's criteria. As such, by the end of 2018, only 5 jurisdictions remain on the list. So the EU blacklist doesn't mean they're bad. It just means the EU just doesn't like some of the laws they have in place. And so it basically means that they can impose certain type of financial penalties on the country that would make things rather uncomfortable for them if they didn't comply. So the big countries kind of imposing their will on the little countries is basically what it is. And anyway, so at the end of 2018, like we may have said, 5 jurisdictions remained on the list, and the majority worked with the EU, and they enacted law that was carefully monitored at the technical level by the Code of Conduct Group on business taxation until the beginning of 2019. Now, the monitoring process revealed that 10 jurisdictions either failed to deliver on their commitments by the agreed deadline or made no commitments to address the EU's concern. And consequently, Aruba, Barbados, Belize, Bermuda, Dominica, Fiji, and Marshall Islands, Oman, and UAE, and Vanuatu were added to the blacklist on March 19, 2019. And then on May 17, 2019, Bermuda, Aruba, Barbados were removed from the blacklist, followed by Dominica on June 14, 2019. And the UAE and Marshall Islands were removed from the list on October 10, 2019, while Belize was removed on November 8, 2019. So here's a little update. In February 2020, EU finance ministers agreed to add the Cayman Islands, Palau, and Panama, and Seychelles to the blacklist after making assessments of the implementation made by each jurisdiction at the end of 2018. And the deadline for implementing the commitments was at the end of 2019. Since they didn't do it, they put them on the list. And the Code of Conduct Group assessment was that Cayman Islands doesn't have the appropriate measures in place relating to economic substance requirements for collective investment vehicles. If you have a company there, it's fine. It doesn't really affect you so much. It more affects it's more the pressure that the EU is putting on the country, but your entity should be fine. Palau failed to implement any of the automatic exchange of financial information, and Panama failed to obtain at least a largely compliant rating from the Global Forum on transparent exchange of information for tax purposes for exchange of information request. And Seychelles was moved from the gray list to the blacklist for failure to address the issues. In fact, I've met with the premier of Nevis in person, and I've actually met with a couple of the different premiers there. and they've been working diligently, and they're not on the list, as we'll talk about. They're not on the list anymore because they've enacted legislation to make things more palatable for the EU's requests. And then on February 18, 2020, the EU blacklist comprised the following 12 jurisdictions: American Samoa, Cayman Islands, Fiji, Guam, Oman, Palau, Panama, Samoa, Seychelles, Trinidad and Tobago, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Vanuatu. So in total, 19 jurisdictions were removed from the gray list of non-cooperative jurisdictions since it was last published in December 2019. While 3 of the jurisdictions, Cayman Islands, Palau, and Seychelles, were added, as we said, 16 jurisdictions were found to have fulfilled the commitments within the 2019 deadline. So these jurisdictions that were removed from the gray list were Antigua and Barbuda, Armenia, Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, Cabo Verde, Cook Islands, Curacao, Marshall Islands, Montenegro, Nauru, Niue, St. Kitts and Nevis, as we said, was removed, as well as Vietnam being removed. So the Council co-iterated its conclusion from its meeting in December 2019. The updates to the black and gray list will be limited to a maximum twice per year going forward. So this change was intended to allow sufficient time for these member states to amend the defensive measures against the non-cooperative jurisdictions to their domestic law. And the next update is scheduled for October 2020. So they set certain deadlines and mile markers for these countries to comply with their requests. And basically, what I found is the leaders of the country are very, very busy enacting other legislation or taking care of problems in the country. And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, this is so time consuming to change these laws and get everybody to agree. Sometimes they miss the deadlines. And as of February 18, 2020, the gray list contains 13 jurisdictions. So that would be Anguilla, and this would be, and they've given other deadlines to these jurisdictions: Anguilla, Australia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Botswana, Eswatini, Jordan, Maldives, Mongolia, Monaco, Namibia, St. Lucia, Thailand, and Turkey. Anguilla, Botswana, and Turkey will remain on the gray list pending its supplementary review of the Global Forum and their rating in relationship to exchange of information. And developing countries without a financial center that may have made meaningful progress in delivering the commitments in regard to the OECD Convention are granted until August 31st, 2020 to sign the convention, until the August 30, 2021 to ratify it. So failure to do so will lead to inclusion on the blacklist. And the following countries are affected, which includes Bosnia, Herzegovina, Botswana, Jordan, Maldives, Mongolia, Namibia, and Thailand. So this is just an update as of today, and there will likely be additions and deletions from the list over time. Just keep in mind, this is just as of today. And just a little update on what's going on in the offshore financial services world. If you have an offshore company in any of these jurisdictions, I wouldn't panic. It really is more of pressure put on the country rather than the owners of the companies, from my understanding of what I've been seeing going on. So just a little update to keep you informed.